Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today I would like to talk about how the Ocarina of Time Remake Nintendo Direct should be close now. And what I'm saying here is that there needs to be a presentation really soon. We've been waiting a little while already. The last and also first time we got any sort of really significant news officially from Nintendo was that initial teaser trailer that came out during the June Nintendo Direct on June 9th. Now we've gone little things like ESRB ratings and things of that nature where we try to extrapolate as much information as possible, but we've all been waiting for that mass deluge of information about this game. Is this game just a remake? Is it more of a rebirth, as Nintendo has been continually coining it across all their different forms of dispersing information, Nintendo Directs, websites, magazines, Twitter, and all. This is set up to be Nintendo's biggest release of the year, and here we are, in the latter half of August. We still don't have a set release date yet. All we know is that it's supposed to come out sometime in 2026, and we don't know that much. But by this point, we have to be close. We have to be really close. And so I want to talk about how close we actually are, and just the overall excitement for this game, because it seems to be pretty significant. More significant than perhaps some have been thinking. I'm quite hyped, and so we're just going to have a good merry old time talking about The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for Nintendo Switch 2. Before continuing though, I will ask that if you find yourself enjoying my videos, and if you haven't subscribed already, to please subscribe. So there has certainly been a debate in terms of what form we'll see that next big batch of official news from Nintendo about the Ocarina of Time remake. And when you look at what's happened with the Dustbloods, we barely got any updates for over a year on the Dustbloods until they gave us a very brief teaser announcing the network test that for the most part didn't even have that much new footage from the initial trailer we saw back in the April Direct of 2025. It wasn't until this past week where previews came out where we learned a whole bunch about the game and we finally got a chance to play the network test. I'll be talking more about my impressions on that game very soon. But my point here is that they've handled the Dustbloods in a very unique way. There hasn't been much shown in Nintendo Directs. They didn't have a game-specific Direct for the Dustbloods. And they could still. We still don't have a release date for this game. We're still not even entirely sure if it's coming out in the year of 2026, even though the parent company of From Software, Kadokawa, has reiterated that it's coming out in 2026 multiple times throughout their different quarterly earnings releases. So maybe there still will be one, but the main point here is that Nintendo could potentially handle the Ocarina of Time remake in a unique way as well. However, what I will also say though, is that the norm that Nintendo's established over the last, I guess, couple years here with 2025 and 2026 is that they want to have an increased amount of game-specific Nintendo Directs. This is something I anticipated because they actually did this in the early part of the Switch 1 generation, and now they're doing it even more so. We take a look at the Nintendo Direct archive. Recently, the Fire Emblem Fortunes Weave Direct, then before that, the Splatoon Raiders Direct. We go back a couple months, not even a couple months actually, a month and a half, the Star Fox Direct, and then earlier in the year, the Tomodachi Life Direct, and then last year, 2 Kirby Air Riders Directs, a Donkey Kong Bonanza Direct, and a Mario Kart World Direct. For most of Nintendo's significant titles that they had a heavy hand in, we have seen game-specific Nintendo Directs for. There are some exceptions, like Metroid Prime 4, like the Dustbloods. The Dustbloods, I understand, is being made by From Software, but Nintendo doesn't have a hand in it. So yes, there are exceptions, but in the case of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, I think it's one of those games where we probably would see some kind of Nintendo Direct for, at least based off how Nintendo has been handling things. However, I go back to 2023, and I remember it was a similar situation in the sense that we had not that much information about Tears of the Kingdom, and we were just a couple months away before the game would be coming out, and a lot of us were getting restless, anticipating, waiting for when they would actually start telling us more about the game because we knew so little. And then all of a sudden, they announced that there would be a presentation by Aonuma himself, not specifically a Nintendo Direct, but actually kind of a little bit more like a Let's Play, somewhat like the Sakurai Presents, but still ultimately a sizable presentation that told us a lot about the game. Nintendo could theoretically do something like that, and maybe it's not exactly branded as a Nintendo Direct. But the fact of the matter is, when we look at the history of things, a Nintendo Direct coming soon makes a lot of sense because there almost always is a Nintendo Direct around this time of the year. Usually September. Going back to 2024, there was a presentation in late August or a couple. but most of the time we are seeing a major Nintendo Direct in September. And given that we're in late August, this fact alone suggests that we're likely very close, less than a month away. Just taking a peek at the Direct archive here again, you look at last September, September 12th. We go back to 2024, it wasn't a normal September Direct, it was actually an Indie World Showcase plus a Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, and then there was also the Museum Direct a week beforehand. But at the very end of August, they had some kind of presentation that was post the big summer June Direct. Going to 2023, September 14th. Going to 2022, September 13th. 2021 is the latest one in recent history, September 23. In 2020, all we had was a partner showcase, but that was on September 17th. 2019, it was September 4th. And so I feel like I've made my point here. We're at a point where if we look at the history of things, we are now less than a month away, according to the last 7 years of Nintendo Direct presentations. The equivalent of that big presentation around that time of the year should happen pretty soon, less than a month away, and based off most of the examples, probably less than 3 weeks away. Conceivably, there could even be something in this last week of August. I'm more so thinking second week of September or third week of September. I'm hoping it's not the first week of September because I am going to PAX West and there's a lot going on that week, so it would make covering all this very challenging, but that's just my own personal selfish bias there. By the way, for anyone that's going to PAX West, I will gladly meet different people, so feel free to let me know in the comments or on Twitter or on Discord or what have you. It's going to be a fun time. But point is, we've now gone to the point where we have to be really close. Also, Nintendo has now given us that Fire Emblem Direct, and Nintendo has now given us information about the Duskbloods. So there isn't much else remaining that needs to be talked about here. There is Switch Sports Resort, that is coming out in October, so there is that. However, people have gotten a chance to play that, so we have learned a little bit more about that than we have about the Ocarina of Time remake. So really, this is the last game Nintendo has yet to give any sort of significant update on since the June Direct. And so at this point, yes, I absolutely anticipate that there's going to be a Nintendo Direct. Now, there's been a lot of Zelda 40th Anniversary leaks that have come out. We've seen a lot of photo imagery for a Zelda-themed Switch 2 console and a Switch 2 Pro controller, and also we've seen the 40th Anniversary logo. This is all highly suggestive that Nintendo has a similar plan to how they've handled Mario's 40th Anniversary, and if that's the case, we're likely looking at a combo Nintendo Direct here, where it's both a Direct about Zelda's 40th Anniversary and about the other things Nintendo would like to talk about in a Direct. Maybe they separate them, maybe they don't. Regardless, all this information needs to be coming soon, like less than a month from now. Possibly just within a couple weeks from now. But if they are doing a combo Direct like this, then I would then anticipate that Nintendo might want to do a separate presentation to tell us even more about the Ocarina of Time remake afterwards. Like, maybe they'll even announce an Ocarina of Time remake Nintendo Direct, a specific one after this general Direct. They would be highlighting Zelda's 40th Anniversary and the other offerings for Switch 2. It might even be somewhat similar to how they handled the Duskbloods situation, where with the June Nintendo Direct, they gave us a small little teaser with a little bit more footage and announced the network test. I would hope Nintendo would give us a bit more than that after waiting so long, especially for the biggest game of the year when it's supposed to be coming out later this year. So maybe a better comp would be for how they handled Mario Kart World in the Switch 2 Direct last year, where we did learn a lot, but they still announced a Mario Kart World Direct there. Now, in that situation, I feel like that might be too much, because we would also have all the other Zelda 40th Anniversary things to worry about, like the movie and whatever else they have planned. So what I would anticipate is a trailer, not a really big trailer, but a trailer maybe like 90 seconds to 2 minutes or so, giving us a little bit more material and announcing a Direct a week or two later, where it would be focused entirely on that. That's my speculation. But of course, there are so many different ways Nintendo could go about handling this, and regardless, I do anticipate we're about to learn something really soon about the Ocarina of Time remake, straight from Nintendo in a significant way. People are excited for this game. I noticed recently that people have been talking about how, according to some analytics that came out from Level Up that they shared with the game business, they put out this article where apparently Ocarina of Time is the most anticipated game of 2026, at least according to game trailer views and articles made about this remake here. Now, honestly, I'm a little bit confused about this information because there are some things that are missing here, like what about GTA? I'm not sure what's going on. Regardless, though, it does speak to the fact that the Ocarina of Time remake is very popular, highly anticipated, and at the very least, almost certainly, is the most anticipated game coming out this year for Nintendo Switch 2. So it's the most anticipated release for Switch 2, and you don't need a whole bunch of data to figure that one out. That is obvious. But it's kind of funny when we're seeing articles like this from Game Rant where they're saying millions of fans of the Legend of Zelda franchise will be unable to play the next game in the franchise when it launches later this year. As you see the community note, it's clarified that this is clearly manipulative clickbait. I'll say that the actual article, the headline, is not as bad. It just seems like a lot of people put out headlines like this on Twitter all the time to get more clicks. But the basic point is that Ocarina of Time Remake is exclusive for Nintendo Switch 2, therefore millions of people who do not own a Switch 2 can't play it. And it's kind of funny, we've been seeing a lot of headlines like this for different Switch 2 games, people trying to paint this as this terrible thing that the Switch 2 has exclusive titles and other people who don't have a Switch 2 should be able to play it. But that's kind of the point of having exclusive titles, to get people to buy the console. That's what they're for. Of course Nintendo's going to put out their most significant title exclusively for their next generation console and use it as something to invite more people to want to play it. In fact, we're seeing a similar thing with the Dust Buds here. I'm noticing many complaints, many criticisms about the Dust Buds coming out exclusively for Switch 2, but that's kind of the point. There are gonna be some exclusives. That's just what happens. I know it may hurt a little bit more when a third-party company chooses to work exclusively with one company, but I think that's one of those scenarios where owning multiple platforms, if it's such a big issue for you, would make sense. What I think is really interesting to think about, though, is that when we finally do get to see this game, when Nintendo starts to really show this game off, that's when a lot more people are going to be clamoring to pick up a Nintendo Switch 2. And the more I think about it, and I know other people have brought this up, so I'm not trying to act like I was the first person to think of this, but the Switch 2 price increase will officially be happening on September 1st. And we know about this Zelda anniversary stuff with the Zelda-themed console and the Pro Controller, and considering where we're at in terms of the timing of things, it may make sense to announce this stuff after the price increase to really help to encourage more people to pick up the console. Like, if they show off this Ocarina of Time remake and it blows us away, and then there's all this cool Zelda anniversary stuff that a lot of people are just going to be unable to resist, it could really do wonders for helping the Switch 2 to maintain its sales momentum even with the price increase. That may be a big part of Nintendo's plan here to really show their hand after the price increase to show that value. Now, maybe you could argue perhaps they show it right beforehand. But timing-wise, just thinking about it, we're here so close, about a week away from the official price increase, and Nintendo's yet to really show their hand for their biggest piece this holiday season. And there's so much this remake could be. There's a lot of thought, as I alluded to earlier, that this is more than just a remake. But we've talked about that in so many different ways, in so many different forms already. Will I find more ways to talk about it? I'm sure, because this game is my most anticipated game of the year, as it is for many others, and it's going to be a really, really big deal, and there might just be a lot to it, and that's exciting. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.